For those of us who have felt different our entire lives, either misunderstood, out of place, or like we just don't fit the mold, finding the right diagnosis can be a life-changing thing. And today's guest was diagnosed later in life with not only a rare chromosome disorder, but also ADHD. I just found out in December, not very long ago. So for years, she struggled with not understanding why life felt harder for her than those around her. But instead of letting those struggles define her, she's actually turned it into her strength. And now she's helping others embrace their own uniqueness, break that stigma around neurodiversity, and empower themselves. My name's Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And this is Fuck the Plan. Please join us in welcoming today's guest, Becky Tilley. Becky, hi. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi. As you said, my name is Becky, and I am the author and creator of Thrive Rare. Originally, I called it this because I was diagnosed with Coulon-de-Vries syndrome, which is still considered a rare disorder. The first diagnosis was in 2006, so it's something that no one generally has ever heard of. So once I had that, I already started getting an answer as to why I was always behind at school, why I could never fit in, why I was always having trouble at work, keeping up with my colleagues. And immediately I looked up the symptoms and it said developmental delay, it said learning difficulties. And I just thought, wow, I finally got some answers here.
Wow.
And the turning point was actually my son was diagnosed at the same time.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was a joint diagnosis.
Wow.
He was only 18 months old. And the biggest part of this, if that wasn't shock enough, I was 4 months pregnant with my third child. And I was told she had a 50% chance of also having KDVS. So
Wow.
really, it was three of us because she was diagnosed with the same disorder after
That sounds
birth.
like a huge bombshell to get all at one time. And I mean, it's crazy to me that, obviously, like I know that we are still discovering things scientifically and medically,
Yeah.
but it's wild to me to think that these things, in 2006 are just being discovered. And
Yes.
to be honest, it's not something that I'm super familiar with. And I purposefully didn't look much into it because I wanted to hear it right from you about how KDVS or Coulon-de-Vries syndrome affects you day to day. What are some of the characteristics of that?
Well, yeah, 50%, and I'm really thankful for this, of people with KDVS have epilepsy.
Oh, wow.
And myself and my two kids, thankfully, have never ever had a seizure. So, yeah. So that's one thing that I really count a blessing. And obviously the developmental delay is something my kids have. They were also born with hypertonia, which is low muscle tone. So they both needed physiotherapy to get to milestones like crawling and walking. This isn't something I had. I was an early talker, which everyone can believe who knows me because I just talk nonstop. But my son, even though he had hypertonia, he was walking before I was. So I was walking age 2, he was walking at age 1.
Wow.
So it's such a broad spectrum, much like with ADHD and autism. There's no one size fits all version of it. Everyone's got their own way they're affected.
Right.
As I said, developmental delay, learning difficulties, hypertonia, epilepsy.
And is it neurological?
It can be, yes. It's considered neurological because of, like, my kids have speech and language therapy. Mm-hmm. So they're delayed in their speech, but their comprehension is incredible. And, they have a small handful of words, but I celebrate each and every single word that comes out of their mouth. So really, that was the biggest spin on what that could have meant for me being diagnosed, was saying, right, I've got 2 kids, my own precious children, who have a disorder no one on the earth has heard of, practically.
Yeah.
And I'm it. I'm all they've got to look to. So I'm like, right, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to view this? And what will I believe KDVS means? What a disorder means to live with? And that flipped everything that I'd ever believed up till that point.
And trying to help them through it while you're still kind of figuring it out for yourself. That is insane. And I guess it shows you how far science has come that they were able to diagnose them so early and just diagnose you. That is kind of what's really blowing my mind at the moment. I'm like, oh my God, they can diagnose them that early and they didn't, like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my son had 18 months of blood tests, and it was only the last attempt to get a diagnosis was a blood sample from me, my husband, and my son. And that was the match for KDVS. But they said, if this doesn't come up, you're on an international database because there's no answers for you. And then, so it's incredible.
What a feeling, that you have. We might not even know what's going on. And, please, by all means, if we cross a line into something you're not comfortable discussing, please just let us know. But, were there indicators, or was there something in your son when he was born, that pointed you to, hey, there might be something going on that made you start thinking and looking into these diagnoses? Yeah. He was
born with floppy baby syndrome. Which again, never heard of. Hypertonia, solar muscle tone, really limp limbs. He couldn't feed. He needed an NG tube. He was severely jaundiced. He was in NICU for 34 days before he could come home.
Wow.
Yeah, so he had a really rough start, and they were like, hypertonia is usually linked to a disorder of some kind. And 9 times out of 10, it's rare. So it was that 18 months of not knowing. And obviously, talking to you guys, ADHD came. Like, I was diagnosed with KDVS at 38. I'm 40 now, and I was diagnosed a few months ago with ADHD as a completely separate diagnosis.
Which is crazy to me, because some of the things you described as part of KDVS kind of are parallel to some of the things that we deal with ADHD. And I often liken it to, I kind of explain sometimes that when I first got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult at 30, I was in the midst of trying to figure out my anxiety and depression and mental health. And it was very hard to figure out until I got that diagnosis what was coming from what. And it feels like it's kind of like a key that unlocks, the puzzle pieces now are clearer because I know what's coming from this disorder, from that disorder. And I remember that feeling for me, but tell me about how it felt, in such a short span of time getting diagnosed with these two things. Were you more relieved or more scared, anxious?
Yeah, I think I was more relieved about the ADHD than anything, because it was my husband that said, have you thought about examining the ADHD route, see if you've got that? Because
when it comes to the spouse, you're like,
he just had an inkling. Like, you've got to look at the pile of laundry in the dishes. Maybe there's something else going on here. So and I looked up the symptoms on Google, and it was like tick lists to me, as in from 1 to 10. I was like, oh, I'm all of those. As in, like, I have all of those every single day. It took like 6 months before I had my assessment. So the application process and the wait was what felt like forever. But I hoped, because KDVS is such an unknown, they're still doing research on it now. I could talk to anyone, even doctors in hospital have said, can I Google Coulibaly? How do you spell it? So I felt quite isolated with that because no one else has it or can relate to it. So I thought, well, at least if I have ADHD, I won't feel so freaking alone. Do you know what I mean? At least I have something other people can understand and relate to. So it was actually, it was a massive sigh of relief for me, without a doubt.
I can imagine.
And because, of course, we don't know much about that disorder, I know we've talked about this before in one of our very first episodes. We talked about that Venn diagram of certain disorders in ADHD and how much overlap there is.
Yes.
Sometimes it's kind of impossible to figure out what's coming from what.
Yes.
And of course, I don't know enough about, your disorder to really say what the symptoms are. But are you finding that sometimes it's just, I have no idea where it's coming from, but it's coming from there, and I'm going to do my best.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I mean, I for a long time believed it was anxiety was my issue, and diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And the fascinating thing was, after talking to my assessor, she said, I don't think that you've got anxiety at all. I think it's ADHD, and you're having so much trouble focusing that is creating anxiety. The root of it is your struggle to focus. That's where the anxiety is coming from, not because you're afraid of everything. It's because you've got ADHD. And I just thought, And then I realized how hard it is to stay on top of everything. As in, I say everything, which for most people is normal daily life, but for me it's like, it's a lot. I get out of bed and I'm like, oh, the washing up, the laundry, oh, do you know what I mean? So
oh yeah, we do. We know what you mean.
We certainly do. Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that sort of ADHD causing anxiety type of, feeling, because that's exactly where I was at before I was diagnosed. And, that whole waiting period, for you was 6, for me it was 8 months or so. And the money it costs, obviously, you are not in the US, so you don't necessarily feel the pain of our healthcare system in the same way, but, that causes a lot of that anxiety, and you're wondering what the heck is wrong with me. People oftentimes, I'm not everybody, but it's often equated ADHD with you don't want to or feel like doing these things. And I'm telling you right now, I am painfully aware of how much I need to do the dishes and how much, and how I do not want to burden my wife with the burden of cleaning up after me, and that's what causes those feelings. And it's hard to understand if you haven't been through it necessarily, that it's not a good feeling. If you were being lazy, you would be happier because you would just not be worrying about it,
Yes.
So it's difficult. And, it's obviously a big relief sometimes when you have a diagnosis that you can point to and say, I'm not just shitty at being an adult. I have this thing.
Yeah.
So what
absolutely.
were those feelings before you got your diagnosis? How did that impact you of feeling different or misunderstood? Tell me about where your head was at beforehand.
It was just, like you said, you kind of wonder, am I the only one that feels like this? That could cry looking into a sink of washing up? And, it's just like, why is this so big for me? Do you know what I mean? And I actually spoke to a therapist that I've had, because I had a lot of difficulties growing up as well. A lot of isolation, rejection, went through a lot of bullying. And even later in life, I was still trying to work through this. And it was even more important to me. Now I knew my kids had the same disorder as I did. I was like, I need to get my head straight. I need to start learning to think about myself and my life and my future differently, like for their sake as well as mine. And one of the things that came up was like, I've got 3 kids and my house is a mess. And I was just like, and she said, and that really bothers you, doesn't it? That your house is a mess. And I was like, yeah, it does. As in, like, I feel like you said, really crap about it. And she said, well, again, that's the sign, just like you said. That says that you're not deliberately like abandoning the work that you have to do around the house. Like, it does matter to you. It's just that motivation. And I struggled with that a lot. But I think having the answers and knowing that I can then help other people that struggle with the same thing to find an identity that empowers them and that they're strengthened by, so they don't see that as their identity. Like, I can't wash up, so I'm useless. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's more to life and who we are than what we struggle with. And that's the journey that I've been on, is discovering that there's more to me than that.
I think getting a diagnosis, especially when you're an adult, there's such a balancing act to it.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you're like, okay, I have an explanation and I might even have a community. But on the second hand, because you've gone so long without getting a diagnosis, it's almost impossible up until that point to not sort of identify yourself as your shortcomings. Because you've had no explanation
100%. I agree.
And you have no reason for it. So you're like, well, okay, I might be all these great things, but I'm also a lazy sack of shit who can't do anything.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love that you pointed it out that way, because there's really 2 sides of this. And oftentimes, and I believe me, I'm not disparaging someone, because I've thought and talked about it the same way before, but we sometimes have a hard time separating the neurological side of the ADHD and the mental health side of it. And by neurological, I mean the disorder. The things that actually make our brains work this way are different from the processes that make us feel bad about our brains working this way. And it's so hard to separate that sort of those tracks, the mental health track and the ADHD track. And I find that they are very closely tied to each other. And when my mental health is not doing great, I'm not doing great at managing my life. And sometimes when I'm managing my life better, it helps manage my mental health better. And then there's times where they're not agreeing at all, and you have to figure out, what to focus on and where to prioritize, And, one of the things I wanted to hear about, because it stood out to me in your stories, you talk a lot about self-acceptance. And
yes,
for me, accepting that we're going to have... To me, what self-acceptance means is that I have to accept I'm not going to be on it every day. There are going to be days where I can't give 150% like my hyper-focused days. There's days I can only give 25 or 30, and I have to prioritize, I need to take care of the things that my wife and my family are counting on me for. I can't take on these additional things that I need to do for myself or for my creative work. So for me, that self-acceptance really has a daily check-in, where we figure out where we're at. And, that's kind of my idea of it. And now I want to hear a little bit about what your idea of self-acceptance feels like, looks like, sounds like.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a huge part of that is knowing that my best doesn't look like anyone else's that I know.
Yes.
As in, my husband, for example, who is considered neurotypical, which I'd never heard of till I was diagnosed with KDVS, didn't even know what that meant, but that's considered like the norm. And he can, like, perfect example, we went food shopping before I got on to talk to you.
Right.
And he goes up and down the aisle, right through the shop, like weaving in and out, getting one thing as we go. And I'm like, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Oh, did I remember that? And then I go back to get something else. And I was like, wow. And he's like, see how quick you can get shopping done? I'm like, stacking everything, putting it in the trolley. I'm like, I would still be here. I'm like, someone could have gone for a coffee break in the time that I take to, like, pack the shopping away.
Right.
But I was just like, it's like, I could say that, and I could say it, like, as a joke and make some fun about it, because I think before, like you said, if someone judged me as lazy or stupid, I would just take it and I would say, yeah, you're right, and I would, you kind of internalize that as my identity.
Right.
Because I had no answer for it. I'm just like, well, yeah, I guess I must be.
Right. Oh my gosh. So, I love that you said it that way, internalizing as your identity, because to me, that, going back to what we were talking about, being relieved with the diagnosis, now I have something I can point to and quote unquote blame it on. And so I know that me as a person, my identity, my personality is not the same as these things happening inside my brain. So I can say, my brain is not, this is how I refer to it all the time with my wife. I say, my brain is not working well today. It's not remembering this. It's not doing that. And it's not me personally, Aaron. It's the thing in here that's making me tick, that gives me those issues. Yeah.
That being said, I'm very cautious about using the phrase blame it on, because
that's true.
That is also a balancing act. I've talked very openly. I have bipolar disorder. I have ADHD, obviously.
Yeah.
I've been in the mental health world for quite some time. And there are always people who get the diagnoses and they use it as a get out of jail free card for destructive and shitty behavior.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That fine line between compassion and understanding yourself and, well, how can you possibly expect me to do chores? I have ADHD. I can't do that.
That's absolutely right. Yes. We don't want to throw.
I treated you like shit, but that's because I had a manic episode and I thought I was better than you. You're gonna have to deal with that. No.
Oh yeah.
Oh no. Yes. Yeah. And you're right to point that out. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't
accountability piece.
That, but I just want to, for the listeners, don't take this as an endorsement to blame everything.
That's a great point.
Or don't blame it and then not try to take accountability. Accountability is important.
I think that's what you're getting at. There's the accountability piece. So it's not an excuse for being accountable. I still take the blame for the real world effects of these things. Mm. So what we're talking about and what I'm trying to get at is how we rationalize that in ourselves with our self-talk, and how we can say, like, yes, my ADHD did lead that to happen, but I'm also the one responsible for counteracting the effects of these things, Boom. So it doesn't mean that I'm not accountable for it. Good example. And, I made a mistake the other week, and my wife has asked me several times, please remember to check your pockets when you put things in the laundry.
Oh, no.
And I was working in our basement, which we're having work done on, and somehow a Sharpie marker got in there, and it ruined some important laundry and got all over the inside of the dryer, and I was not feeling real good about that. But at the same time, it's like, yes, did my ADHD cause me to forget in that moment because I was rushing and I just took all my working clothes off that were dirty and gross and I felt like I just needed them away from me? Yes, it was my ADHD that made me not think to look in my pockets. But at the same time, I'm still responsible for that mistake. I'm still the one who left the marker in there. I'm still the one who needs to apologize and needs to help out with cleaning and all of those things. So I agree with what you're getting at, Cass, there. We can't get rid of accountability because we have somewhere to point to the cause. It's more of, I guess, cause and effect than a blame, quote unquote. And I do kind of hesitate to say blame as well, but I think it's good to have something to point to, because if it was just coming from how I am, then there's nothing I can work on. If you say, oh, well, that's just how I am, sorry, where do you go from there? But if you say my brain is causing me to do these things and I need to figure out a way to work with it and work against it, then that's a different conversation and a different story.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a good segue, because there was another question that I wanted to ask you is, we're talking about how we look at these things and how we feel these things. So a big part of your story, from what I'm gathering, is that you've really kind of made an intentional shift from seeing these diagnoses as like a limitation to try and recognize them as a part of what makes us powerful, what makes us capable, and what makes us unique. So talk to me a little bit about that and what you try and put out there as far as that goes.
Yeah, well, like you said, I think self-acceptance is the key thing in all of this, and it's what took me, well, I'm 40 now, but so it was during like my 39th year that I really truly started to learn to love myself. And like you said, and I completely agree with both of you with that accountability thing, that is so important for your own integrity as a person, to know that, I have these disorders, but I know every day that when I show up for myself, for my family, and for this world, that I'm giving my best and actually making your peace with the fact it doesn't look like anyone else's. It took a long time for me to look at what my husband gets done in a day and not say to myself, well, you've done nothing, you're useless, like that kind of talk I used to say to myself. It's like, well, no, actually, I hoovered the floor and I put the kids' stuff away and I did my, social media and I did my book writing. So it's like, so for me, everyone's wins are different. And this is, again, to bring my kids into this again, is what they taught me. Because there's a lot of comparison just in the world at large, so much comparison going on. And because my kids are considered to be developmentally delayed, and again, they've got speech and language therapy, I don't look at the timeline, the early years foundation stage in the UK, and think they should be talking right now. Oh, you stupid? Why aren't you talking yet? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't, that wouldn't even go through my head. So I just thought, so then how am I any different? If I am with the same disorder that they have, and I have learning difficulties as well, that's what made work so hard. And numbers especially is just like, I have to give my 6-year-old's maths homework to my husband because I'm like, I don't want to do it. So like, hand it over. But I don't tell myself I'm dumb because I can't help her with the homework. I'm like, I just need to give that to my husband because my brain doesn't function for that. As in like, that's not me. That's not where I shine, and that's what I encourage, is that my kids grow up knowing that they don't look like their neurotypical peers and they're not doing as much, but they're doing what they can do and they're loving it and they're giving their all. Every teacher says they give 110% of their effort. And that's what I want to be an example of, is that just because your best effort doesn't look like the norm, it doesn't make it any less valid, any less valuable. So it's really my most important thing. My biggest driver is being a role model for them.
Right.
And again,
that's a great
teaching them to be their best and to do their best and not to use it as a blame card, but like you said, to say, be your best, do your best, but know that is enough. Don't go comparing yourself to everyone else.
And I love that you're teaching them how to see what their best is versus what everybody expects. Because, I mean, that's really, it's hinting at the main theme of our show, you know, is that everybody's path, everybody's best is going to be different. You know, my wife and I, between the two of us, she's the thinker, I'm the doer. She's much better at planning and thinking these things through, and I'm much better at picking the heavy thing up and putting it in the other place.
Yes.
And those are different roles that we have different strengths at. And why would I try and do the thing that she's better at? And why would she try and do the thing that I'm better at? Just so we can feel like we did it? No, you do what you're good at. I do what I'm good at. I don't need to validate myself by doing something that you're better than me at. Why don't I just let my wife, who's one of the most stunning, capable, amazing humans I've ever met, why would I be trying to do her thing better when I can do my thing better than she can? You know? It's like, I drive a stick shift. She doesn't. Why would we trade cars in the morning? It's the same idea. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Why should she get in my car and try and drive it when it just wouldn't work? You know, I know it's a silly example, but I think it puts it out there. It puts it out there, I think, in a very plain language terms, is that, you know, if you're not good at that, why on earth would we switch just so we can feel like we're doing it? It makes no sense, you know, and people's egos a lot of times are tied to it, and, you know, that's not an admonishment at all, but, you know, I sometimes kind of marvel at the fact that people try and prove that they can do things that they shouldn't be proving, you know. Why is that, you know?
We tend to have so much more compassion and empathy for physical limitations than we do for mental ones.
Very true. Yes. Yeah.
When there are physical limitations, people tend to have so much more empathy and are so much more willing to help. But when there's a mental limitation or an emotional limitation or something that people can't actually see before their eyes, it seems like all the empathy goes out the window, and it's well, I don't understand why you don't just do it yourself kind of thing.
And I think that's another reason why I'm so passionate about doing what I do is, and I'm sure you guys are the same, is that so many people out there do struggle with that, and maybe even with a diagnosis still feel that weight of other people's stigmas and judgments around mental health, you know, because it's sometimes not as, you know, black and white as it is to say you've got a diagnosis, now you're fine. As in, like, you know, it's even for me, it's like it's like it's still a battle, it's still an ongoing,
it's
you know,
more like now the real work starts, is what it's more like, you know. It's not necessarily that you're solved, you know, here's a bottle of pills and have a great day. We're not talking about high blood pressure here. We're talking about a very complicated part of how you think, act, feel, do, and run your life. Yeah, absolutely. I think I've just done away with feeling bad about not being normal. Just to the best of my ability, made my peace. Not normal, never going to be normal. Best thing about me now. Yep.
You know, it's just that's the mentality I've adopted. Yeah.
And that's amazing because this is such a recent, like, in the grand scheme of things, this is such a recent development and a recent thing for you to have learned. And you are already at that point. That point takes people lifetimes sometimes to get to. Some people never get there. And you're already there. So I just want to, like, give you massive props because that is...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's been going on 4 or 5 years now since I was officially diagnosed. I was diagnosed as a kid, and then there was this idea of like, oh, well, kids grow out of ADHD. So for a year and a half, I was actually treated, and then, you know, my brain doesn't work so good, so I kind of forgot about all that. And then at 30, I rediscovered it, and... You know, I wasn't thinking back to when I was 12, you know, but at the same time, it's like realizing that all of this time I could have been doing things differently or learning better. Like that's something that I still struggle with, even, you know, going on 5 years later now is, you know, had I learned about this, how would things have been different? And I don't necessarily regret the things that I've done. You know, my life led me to where it is, and I love my life now. I wouldn't change a thing, but you know, it's inspiring to me that you've kind of had that change in such a short period of time. And obviously, you know, you had two different diagnoses that are playing in a factor here. And, you know, I want to hear more about what inspired you to start your platform and your community here, because it does seem, like Cass said, a pretty quick change from when you first realized that, hey, all of these things that are happening to me, I'm not the only one, and now you're the point where you want to help other people with it. So I just kind of want to hear a little bit more about your thought process and what got you to that point.
Yeah, I think for the longest time, I tried so many 9-to-5s. My CV, honestly, don't know how many sheets I would need to fill that out.
For the Americans, the CV is like a resume.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
And have a little translator at the bottom.
Yeah,
a little cartoon version of me and Aaron being like, in American, this is this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Us silly Americans.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'd never, ever felt like I fit in. One boss even said to me, like, the head manager's just been in, I do yourself a favor, hand in your notice before they sack you. Basically, wow. And it was like, oh, and then another job.
The audacity.
I know, I was sacked, or laid off, I think you call it, because I was trying too hard. Is another thing that I got dumped for from work, and it's just
these neurotypicals and their silly rules. You can't try hard enough. You can't try too hard. You can't do this. You can't do that.
Yes,
you don't understand.
Couldn't win.
I'm here to be the vibe leader. I'm here to make sure we have a good work environment. I am not here to go above and beyond. That's what my brain is for, you know.
What the hell do you put on your unemployment form? Okay, and why did they let you go? Oh, I tried too hard.
Tried too hard.
Yes. So in the end, I decided to work from home, doing childminding, because again, what are your strengths? Even if no one else in the world recognizes them, there is something in you to work with. You just need to have enough, I think, drive inside of you to find it. And for me, it was, I'm a nurturer. I'm a born nurturer and encourager. So I ended up working from home because I'd had enough of being, rejected by colleagues, got rid of because I wasn't good enough or I was too good or whatever else. And I started doing that initially. Went through 8 years of infertility actually before I had my kids.
Oh, wow.
So it was, so the whole time of that I was looking after kids from home. So that was kind of like fulfilling that need. I had to be a mum as well. So that's another like character strengthening journey that I've been on. And then once I had my kids and after I got the diagnosis, I kind of thought, as in, this is my time. This is my opportunity to do my own thing for the first time in my life and show my kids that just because you have a disorder and you're neurodiverse, it doesn't mean you don't belong here, doesn't mean you don't deserve a place, that you don't deserve to have confidence and to believe in yourself. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take this encouraging spirit that I have and I'm going to put it out in the world. And I did that. And the first thing I did was I joined KDVS support groups. And I racked my brain because I think sometimes if you've been so used to feeling downtrodden and put down by everyone and you've been going along with those labels and identity of lazy and stupid, then the thought of there being anything good about you or anything in your life to celebrate seems pretty impossible. Yep. So I really had to dig deep and go, come on, like, what is it? There's got to be something. And I said, well, got married. So, that's a positive given my history. And I had 3 kids as well. So I thought I'd put that on my little posts, and I thought, oh, what else did I do? I've been to college and I got a diploma in performing arts, so put that because that's an achievement.
Nice.
Yeah, and the feedback I got was incredible. It was completely overwhelming, saying, I hope my kids grow up with the life you have, and thank you for finding us, and you really encouraged. And I just thought, wow, as in, like, my encouragement can actually be a world changer here, as in could help people. Families from literally all across the world were reaching out to me saying, tell me more about your story and how are your kids doing. And obviously said that Joshy was born with hypotonia. He's walking at age 1. He's a happy, active, healthy little boy. And again, they're like, oh, tell us more, help us kind of thing. So I just thought, so initially I thought that would be my calling, would be to help KDVS families. And then the more I went into that rabbit hole, the more I was like, hold on. When I think about it, whatever your disorder is, everyone out there, even if they're neurotypical, has those moments at least where they go out into the world and think, I don't belong here. Or what am I supposed to be doing? What am I here for? Where's my crowd? Where's my people? Like, everyone has that issue. Everyone has issues with confidence, figuring out who they are, what their identity is that is authentic to them. So I just thought, you know what, I really want to take this further. I want to get outside the KDVS community, still stay rooted in it and help people. So now I've got the best of both worlds, as in I'm still very much a part of that. I still have families. Even just weeks ago, I've joined my support groups and messaged me personally. But also I've got Thrive Rare, which is for anyone, much like you guys, who's ever felt like I'm an outsider, I'm a misfit, I'm a reject. I've got my own unique way that no one can connect with, and to actually say, you know, there's a real strength and there's a real gift in that you can use to help people. Because I've helped so many people, more than I ever could have dreamed. And it was by being me. Who am I? Like I said, what are my strengths? Putting them out into the world, that is what created Thrive Rare. And it's still growing strong nearly 2 years later. It's still going. I've released 2 books that are 5-star books on Amazon. I've got growing social media platforms. I've got support groups and families that reach out to me who have got kids with rare disorders. So it was like, that was my dream. That was the dream I had. Might not be a neurotypical dream, but it was mine. And now I get to tell my kids that, guess what? Mama made her dream come true. And I've got the same disorder you have. You know,
That's
so
awesome.
If I can do it, let's find out what your dream is, what your strengths are, and let's get you out there. You know?
That's really great. And I love the way that you're talking about it, as in you're realizing that this is something that you have an inherent value. This is your story and you sharing part of you that's helping all of these other people. And it's I've gone through that in a few ways here or there, and I know that Cass has too with your performing and everything. So like realizing that you yourself and your story inherently have value, and you don't need to do a task like doing a 9-to-5 type of task job to have value is an insanely good feeling. And I don't think enough people get to feel that in their lives, you know, and that's super rewarding.
In the world of social media and the world of constantly being connected, you know, everybody puts out this very polished persona. And they post the pictures where they look good. I'm guilty of that too. We all are. They post, you know, the life updates that are exciting, and it's everybody's highlight reel is out there. That to the point where like a genuine take or being authentic and sharing what's actually happening becomes such an undervalued act of bravery. You're like, hey, I'm shiny sometimes and sometimes I'm not. And here's how I feel when that happens. And people don't understand how not alone just being honest can make you feel.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. You're being honest and you're showing yourself like the good parts, the bad parts, everything. And in doing that, you're becoming a role model, not just for the people who reach out to you, but for the people who are reading that and aren't quite ready to admit on a public platform, I have these weaknesses too. I also don't feel like I fit in, but I'm not ready to admit that to the social media world yet.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, completely. I mean, I still in many ways, I don't fit in now. I love it when people ask me what I do for a living. Because I'm just like, let's get ready. As
little
in, like,
of this, little of that.
I know the response that's coming. I know it. I'm like, you got Thrive Rare, got my own social media platforms. So what's it about? It's about embracing your uniqueness, celebrating what makes you different, and seeing it as a gift. And they're just like, it's like, what do they even say?
You see the head explode.
Yeah, I do. And I'm writing books about it. Like my kids and we've got a rare disorder. And it's like called Chromosome syndrome, and you can see them like retreating back, like I wish they never asked me.
And I'm like, oh my god, she's so excited about it. What is it? How do I respond?
Yeah,
because that's usually not what you get when you ask someone what they do for a living. You know, usually they're like, I answer the phone for a living. You know, I work at a coffee shop. You know, it's not something that they're super passionate about. And like,
I am like, cool. I'm so like passionate. They don't know what they've lifted the lid on when people ask me, but it's and I do, and like you said, and I love it because it is my inherent value that I encourage everyone to seek within themselves. It's that thing no one can actually take away from you when you really get to know that strength of yours and you embrace it as your own, and you don't need anyone else to come along and tell you you're okay. You're like, I'm okay because I know this about me and I know I give my best to put it out there. That's what shifted everything for me, honestly.
That's great. And so if somebody was kind of feeling that way, feeling misunderstood, like they can't fit in, realizing that they have this self-doubt or this shame cycle, what would be your advice as far as where to start? Where would you tell somebody to start with, this process of kind of reclaiming your identity?
Honestly, well, this is a really great opportunity to say, I did not get here by myself. This is not a solo journey for me to be who I am now. I had many, many years of therapy to get here. I had a really tough upbringing, as in physically bullied, verbally bullied, having to move school was that bad kind of thing, and then having the same trouble at work with colleagues as well. So I really did feel that dark, lonely hopelessness of literally, why the hell am I here? Yeah. And it really got that bad. It got that painful. And I just think actually having to, as you said, be completely and utterly, brutally honest with yourself and say, even if you don't say it on social media or to anyone at least to yourself to start with, say, I'm completely broken. I feel insecure. I feel lonely. I feel like I have no place. To actually admit those truths to yourself is really freaking hard work, because I think your first response to that is, well, you're weak then, you're a failure, and all this kind of stuff goes off in your head. So I think to be able to have that vulnerability to say to a counsellor, like, this is what I'm dealing with, this is how I really feel about myself, because I genuinely hated the person that I was so much that I did need the therapy to kind of guide me out of it. But once I did get there, years later, I've spread my own wings now, as in I don't need anybody to come and tell me that I'm okay, because I've done that work. I've proven to myself my own worthiness by daring to go there into the deepest, darkest depths of my mind and my soul to say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and I'm going to come out as who I authentically am. I'm going to be proud of it and I'm going to own it. So I had to make that decision beforehand and know that every step of that journey, every therapy session was getting me closer to that point. And then when I reached it, it's only up from here. I really believe that.
That's a beautiful thing.
I definitely agree with that. And, if we could have one last sort of parting thing, what's one takeaway of everything we've talked about today? What do you think is the number one thing that somebody listening should take away from this?
I would just say to accept yourself. I think many of us, when we think of self-acceptance, you might think of the highlights, as in the things that are great about you, the things you love about you. What are they? And I would always encourage people to seek those out. But sometimes I think before you can reach that, before you can really own what is great and what is strong about you, you need to explore everything that isn't strong, everything that is falling apart and that is broken, to actually go there first and embrace that side of you. Because when you can embrace that side of you that you felt as a failure and a reject your entire life, then you really become a force to be reckoned with, because no one can hold that against you anymore. No one can put you down with it or judge you with it, because you're like, I've owned that, thank you very much. And I've moved on with my life, and no one can rob you of that.
That's great.
Yes.
I think that's awesome advice.
Yeah.
So I also just want to ask before we go, where can people follow your journey, connect with Thrive Rare, become part of your communities? Now's your chance to put the shout outs out there.
Yeah, well, I've got my 2 books on Amazon. I'm currently in the process of writing my 3rd, which will be my most impactful yet. It's been such a ride just this past year. ADHD diagnosis as well, which will be included in it. So yeah, the journey just gets deeper and further as I go. And I'm also on TikTok and I'm on YouTube, Instagram, so I can give you all the links for those.
Perfect.
Excellent. We will have those in the description. Well, I just wanted to thank you so very much for being here, Becky. We really appreciate having you on here. I love your story, and I love everything we've gotten to talk about. And again, just want to share with everyone here, we will be putting all of the links in the description here, but please listen and take these ideas in, because this is something that's been so impactful for me in my life to go through some of these experiences, that it really puts you, I think, in a better frame of mind to start looking towards the future rather than trying to figure out, how do I get through the day now? So it's one thing that people ask about a lot, and I just really love the fact that we've gotten to cover so many of those things here.
Yes.
Any final thoughts from either of my my co-host or my gracious guest?
It's been an absolute joy to talk to you, and I agree with what Cass said, is in like that freedom of being completely honest. because I think we can so often get inside our own heads and say, I'm alone in this, I'm the only one that feels this way. And then as soon as you dare to open up and share your story, eventually, even if it doesn't happen right away, someone will find you, because we're all looking for that person to connect with, or that community to find our people, to find our tribe. So
awesome.
And it sounds like a cliche, but you can't authentically connect with another person if you haven't authentically connected with yourself.
Yes,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
Getting to the point where you can do that sucks. I'm not going to say it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It does. Yeah, agree.
But if you can kind of go into it and remind yourself to talk to yourself like you would a friend, like talk about your problems openly with yourself, and then don't say, well, shut the fuck up, you suck. Would you say that to your friend? Hopefully not. Unless you have that kind of relationship. Answer yourself the way you would answer a friend.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here again, and thank you to all our listeners for listening in. Remind them who you are.
Becky Tilley, and Thrive Rare is my thing. I've got social media platforms, and I'm a book author as well.
All right. I'm Aaron Frank.
I'm Cass.
And this has been Fucked Up Plan. Thank you so much.